My guest this week is Phil Crossman. Phil spent almost his entire working life in the motor industry, culminating as managing director of Honda UK on the back of some 17 years in Honda total. And he's got an enormous amount of experience in that particular industry, but also just broader perspectives on leadership, having been at the very top of a complex organization that works obviously very closely with its Japanese parent. Phil and I first met about 18 years ago when I was doing a leadership exchange program that had been set up by the Royal Air Force, and that was with Honda. And we'll talk about it in the podcast, but it was a fascinating experience in itself because we shared an awful lot of common ground, an awful lot of things that were different. And both of us gained a tremendous amount from the experience. He's a great guy to talk to. I really enjoyed the interview. I hope you're going to as well. And without further ado, I'm Bob Judson. You're listening to Leading for Life Stories, and let's go to it.
Phil, what a delight to have you on my podcast. We've known each other for a long time. It's a real privilege to have you here, and I'm very, very grateful for your time. Thanks very much.
I'm very pleased to be joining in, Bob. I think it was 2005 we first met at Coningsby, and it was about November, I think, because I remember it was being very cold.
Yeah, I do remember that. It was a leadership exchange program that the Air Force set up with Honda, and what a great event. It was fantastic. I remember it vividly, actually. Interesting exchange with obviously aeroplanes to cars, but I think lots in common. It was great fun.
It was. And part of two things that interest me greatly, and I think we both decided fairly quickly that Honda was not going to change the RAF, and the RAF wasn't going to change Honda.
Yeah, pretty much.
And from then on, it was a great learning. I learned a lot from it. It was fabulous.
Yeah, ditto. I mean, I remember vividly coming to you at Honda when it was at Slough and looking at the way you operated and the stuff you were doing with the amount of attention you were paying to the competition and things like that, and all the data and actually going out in I think it was an Accord at the time, wasn't it, with all the brand new toys and playing around to see what worked well. That was good fun as well. So yeah, it was a great day out.
Well, I refer to that in a lot of the industry interviews I had to do. People were talking about autonomous cars and that sort of thing as being how they're going to change the world. And I refer to you driving that car at night on the M4 with hands on your head.
With your guys in the back going, I'm not really sure you should be doing this.
No.
Yeah, it was very funny. Hey, well, look, I think for our listeners here, you've got a fascinating career that I'd really like them to hear a bit more about. So just as a start of a 10, can you just give a bit of a short summary of your journey, as it were, through to where you are now?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I started at a company that is now gone, and this is a feature of my working life. Many of them have gone. Triumph Motor Company, I started as a commercial apprentice. They wanted me to be an accountant. I didn't, but that was the way I could get into the company. I trained with them, qualified, and went into the manufacturing side in terms of finance. I worked out fairly quickly I wasn't going to be a very good accountant and didn't like the factory very much, but it was very, very fascinating. And I think the tales of British Leyland at the time, I think there's a book in that alone of my experience working on it. It was fantastic in many, many ways. But I had one of those forks that you talked about, I think, in one of your podcasts recently. A friend of mine was in HR. We were out having Thursday night beers, and he said, "Do you fancy becoming a business management manager?" I had absolutely no idea what one of those was. And then he sold me with the killer line with, well, of course, you get a second company car. And at that point, he had me. And I went into an area I never even knew existed, hadn't thought about it. And it was about looking after the franchise dealers of British Leyland at that time, in terms of their finance, their structure, recruiting them, stopping them going bust and that sort of thing. And a whole new world opened up to me in this distribution side and sales and marketing side of the industry. And that took me down a path that I loved. I really, really enjoyed helping dealers. Moved to Peugeot to do the same sort of thing, because Peugeot had just announced they were going to go from 1% market share to something like 6%. And at the time they were making fairly in agricultural cars, and they were going to become mainstream in the UK. They just bought Talbot. And I built up a skill from that, which I loved, of stopping dealers going bust. And this time they had no management accounts. Dealers are going broke, probably one a month and that sort of thing. And I built up a lot of expertise, and my accountancy helped a little bit in that I understood balance sheets, cash flows, dealer structure and that sort of thing. So I got some success saving businesses going broke and turning them into profitable businesses. So I absolutely love that side. And we'll probably talk about Peugeot a little bit later on if we explore people who influenced me, because there's a couple of guys there that they switched the light on for me in terms of the way of leadership and style. But I moved from there to Nissan, and that was another fabulous experience. They were just going from an importer to a factory-owned company. So I joined as number 33 employee in a room in London. No systems, no staff, no dealers, absolutely nothing. And 6 months later, we opened up with 100 dealers, ability to sell, and the company went on during my time there to sell 100,000 cars, which is a sort of benchmark figure. Loved it. And during that time, I had a little trial of moving into regional sales. I'd done that a little bit before at Peugeot. Wasn't successful. And again, if we talk about failures in life and what you learn from them, there's an element at Peugeot that was that. Recruited a lovely team, great in business management, and then went out to the regions and was very successful in that. And then I was able to run the Nissan dealer group as managing director for about 2 years. Unfortunately, Nissan was going broke at the time and merging with Renault. And I'd had a sort of offer from Honda for some time to go and join them, which I did in the year 2000. I took a little step back into a holding position as a regional manager. Absolutely loved that. And Honda was such contrast to anywhere I've ever been in my life before as a company. For the first 6 months, I wondered what I'd done. Then you get to understand the philosophy and the spirit of the company, and I just felt at home entirely. And I worked my way through from being sales director, where I think we first met, to joining a support function called dealer development and merging both the cars, motorbikes and power products all together, which was preparation for coming back to be the head of the car business and then subsequently managing director. So in a nutshell, started as an apprentice, finished as MD.
Yeah, I mean, what a success over all those years. And as you say, it's really interesting to make the contrast. When we talked earlier on, we talked earlier about the contrast between the Air Force and the car business. And, actually consolidation, shrinkage. I joined an Air Force that was 98,000 strong. I left when there were 31,000 left. It was an extraordinary change. And I think, you'll have seen a lot of that going through the car industry as well with all that change. And I mean, actually, I want to come back later and talk a bit more about the kind of future of where you see that going, because I think it'd be churlish not to ask you that, given your experience in terms of where the motor industry is heading. But no, really great. What a great career. You must be hugely satisfied with the way that ended up.
Oh, I've loved it. I'm a bit of a one-trick pony, I think. I probably couldn't have done anything else. I absolutely adored the industry. I don't go gooey over cars. I don't look at Ferrari and dribble over them or anything like that. I love the whole process of getting something out of the ground, building a car, and then the process of getting it to customers and looking after customers, the whole life cycle of a product. I've never got tired of it. Never got tired of going into a factory and watching an empty cage. 30 seconds later, there's a floor, side panels. 30 seconds later, it all comes together, and just watching this flow of a car being built. So I must have been around, a dozen car factories. And the last time I went to one was just before I retired. And I got as excited watching this as I did when I first went around Longbridge as a 19-year-old.
Yeah, I was very struck actually when I had a Honda a few years ago, as you know, and the comment about the engines, that basically they were building the engines the first time the engine was run when it was in the car. There was no testing anymore. They were so reliable that basically the manufacturing process was so robust, which is incredible, isn't it? That they've got to the point now with the level of skill, automation, finesse, and so on to be able to do that. It really is it's a great testament to the industry.
I think in terms of understanding your product, Nissan was a fantastic experience of their quality and their internal salesship. They just built their cars brilliantly, and Honda engineered and built their cars brilliantly. Having worked for BL and Peugeot, if your car didn't break down within the first week, that was a success. And I'm not being cynical about that. It was, we just used to get our company car, and before we took it for its first service, we'd have a list of things to fix. And I went to the factory at Nissan and I said, well, where's your rectification area? And he nearly hit me. He said, we don't have a rectification area. The car comes off the track and it goes to a customer. And the quality was engineered into it. And that started me thinking about whatever you do, whatever product you have, it is to get the quality of that product right, whether that's in your team's performance, whatever. It is all about what you've got to offer to the world, to other customers internally, and to people outside.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to delve back a bit further into history. I mean, you talked about yourself as a one-trick pony. I think it's being a bit hard on yourself, having gone all the way to the top of a big organization. When you go right back to the beginning, what was it that motivated you, and how did you kind of get started when you were first heading into the world of work?
Well, it's probably, I don't know whether my motivation was, I never thought I was going to be MD. I never went into work thinking I'm going to do that. I went to work in somewhere that I was interested in. And I'll be very honest, my motivation was get a job with a company car because that mattered to me. And I couldn't think or see beyond that. And I sort of bumbled along a bit, I think. My performance was not right. You know, looking back, if I could tell myself then, would be get your attitude right, because I thought, here I am, a qualified accountant. What's BL going to do for me now? And the reality is I should have been thinking, right, here I am at the bottom. What am I going to do for BL? You know, the old famous John Kennedy quote. I think when I heard that for the first time, another light comes on. You think, actually, I've been doing this wrong. I've got to be making a difference. I've got to change my attitude and approach to things. And it was then I started seeing there is a route through an organisation. I just assumed I'll go into BL and stick there.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Stepping stones, because I think it's a common issue for people now that they don't think of things like that. Some of the time that they're looking very high early on, and in reality, life is a series of steps. It's a series of forks in the road, and it's a series of things that require an element of luck, and that's really important. And I'm not sure that necessarily people think about that as much as they might do these days, because if you're too ambitious too early, then you risk disappointing yourself constantly, I think. And I mean, I'm the same as you. I never expected to get to where I did, and it was just following a series of opportunities that took me in the right direction.
I think once you understand that you're employed to make a difference to whatever you do, you know, you're just not there to turn up. If you're doing anything that's just a job, then change it. You've got to have something that you're passionate about, you know, and you really want to make a difference.
Yeah, 100%. I for the whole of my career, I think I was looked at myself with two things. I wanted to enjoy what I was doing, and I wanted to be content with the reflection in the mirror that looked back at me, and essentially that I was doing the right things that fitted my value set, and that I was content, particularly as I got more senior and had people working for me, that I was happy with what I was selling to the troops, as it were. But I that point about enjoying what you do, I totally agree. I think if you're not doing that, life's too short. You need to find a better way through.
Absolutely. But I think when you're younger, you don't think about it. You just look at leaders in some ways. And probably what I learned from people early on was not what to do. I remember I turned up at the candy factory at Triumph in my little old Morris 1100 and parked it in the wrong place, which I didn't realise was the sales director's car park. He parked his car behind me, and I was then summoned to see him, you know, after work, to be told in no uncertain terms how bad my car was, and that if I ever parked my such and such a car in his such and such place again, I would never work for BL again, and stormed off. And I thought to myself, well, there's two things. One, I'd really like a company car like his, which was the Triumph Stag, gorgeous, and I will never, ever speak to anybody like that in my life. You know, I probably didn't realise it at the time, but that was implanted. I will not act like that. And later, as you're working through, you understand that your behaviours and the shadow of the leader, how important that is. He obviously had a bad day, and some week I parked in his face, and that was his reaction. And that was one of the things, that was a real big learning point, is you manage how you react to things going forward, you know.
So fascinating. When I do workshops with people, I quite often talk about my own leadership style and leadership journey, if you like. And to your point, I mean, I have shaped that based on good things that I've seen from people, you know, examples that I really like, and that I'm going to go, yeah, okay, I'd quite like to do that. I'd be a bit like him or her. And and equally to actually turn around and go, I'm never going to be like that, and put that in the box of things that I'm never going to, you know, never want to see again. So no, that's a really great example. It's fantastic.
I think the converse of that was at Peugeot. There was two guys there that were running the sales and marketing function, and they probably exhibited some of the best leadership skills you could see, although I wasn't aware of it at the time. And one was called Todd Evans, who came in as marketing director and then took over the function. And he had this fantastic ability to paint a picture. which again, you learn as a leader, if you're taking people with you, this is where we are now. This is where we're going to be. Great. But then it was very clear. These are the steps we will take to get there. This is how we're going to do it. This is what we need this company to do with our product to get us this place. And it was just, I sat and listened to him in one presentation. It was just fantastic because he said, we're going from 1.5%, we're going to get 6%. I was probably very cynical in those days. The peer group was cynical. And actually, by the end of it, I thought, that's another light come on. I have to change the way I think about this because it is possible. And again, I've tried to adopt that style all the way through, saying, whenever I've gone through a department or a new company, this is how I see where we are, having spoken to everybody. This is how I'd like it to be, please comment. But then these are the things we will do along the way of how we're going to get from the desert to the oasis sort of thing. And that was a great story. And the other guy, Roger Manning, he was just very disciplined. In the 70s, it was a bit more style of management. But his was every minute discipline, do the right thing, get the basics right, get the right principles. And that was just hammered home by watching him. We'll go to a dealer dinner, everybody's sitting down having a dinner, and somebody would just criticize something. And his ability to just manage it and explain back in beautiful, clear terms as to why we've done what we've done and what we're going to do without losing his temper. I just thought, I've got to be able to be like that. I've got to be able to turn an argument around if somebody's ranting and raving at me and get control of it.
Yeah, no, it's key, isn't it? Managing your emotions, I think, is a really, really important part of being a leader for sure. You sort of touched on it in your earlier remarks about Honda, but I remember vividly when I went to visit you, and indeed when you were at Coningsby with me, you talked about Old Man Honda and the influence and on the whole business that had, and the kind of, in some way, challenges from working in UK, but for a Japanese firm that was very Japanese controlled. But that sort of ribbon of culture running through it from Old Man Honda. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? I mean, I'd really like to know what sort of that experience meant to you and how much it influenced the way the firm worked and indeed influenced you.
It influenced me personally greatly because what it underpinned to me was you manage yourself first, then you manage the company. And the philosophy was written in probably the 1950s. It might appear a bit twee to some people because it was written in sort of half Japanese type language and American, so it doesn't come quite across. But if you dig down to it, there were some key elements to it. And the biggest thing I took out of it was, as a manager, you've got a job to bring people on and learn. But it was things like go to the place. So don't sit in your head office. Don't tell everybody what is actually happening at they call it the Gemba, which would be the front line or the marketplace or whatever. Go and understand and listen. And that to me I found vitally important because I used to get so frustrated with people who would be in their little bunker in the head office telling us what was happening. And we knew it wasn't like that. So you want to say to them, actually, this is what's happening. And if they're taking the trouble to go out and listen and hear, it made a huge difference. So that sort of thing I thought was fantastic. Having a youthful approach to everything, being you, be young in your thinking and be open to all new ideas. Everybody's in the company's got a voice. And they did some fantastic things called a new Honda Circle. And basically this is a global policy. Any associates in any part of the company get together. They don't have to know each other, work in the same department, and they discuss an area that they believe needs improving in their organization. And they go through a very structured problem-solving process. It's part of a competition. All these groups meet together. The top two go to a similar thing in Europe. Top ones of those go to a similar world convention. And the most fantastic thing about those is when you can bowl up, there's people from 20 countries there, and they're all speaking the same language. They're all have the same attitude of we can do it, we can fix it, we can change things. Just, I think, one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. And I did go through a wobbly point once when I was looking up at some of the senior people and they weren't behaving in the way that they talk about. They were standing up at a big presentation and say, we've got Honda philosophy, fantastic. And then their behavior was atrocious outside of it. And I was thinking to myself, well, why do I bother? And I remember again in one of your podcasts, you talk about having a break. I used to get my breaks by walking the dog. So through the fields, and I'd sit and think things through. And it came to me that actually it's not about them, the way they behave, it's about how I behave. I don't have to behave like them. I've got to do the right thing. I've got to get on with helping our team and getting our team going. That was transformational in understanding the philosophy. Manage yourself and then constantly look for improvement, perpetual improvement all the time. There's two other things really as well. It's quite a challenging company because they use the term kick the ladder. So as you climb up a process, suddenly you get on the ledge, think you made it, well, take the ladder away and start again. And people would often wonder why they drop out of Formula One at the drop of a hat. They get a very successful team and walk away. That is entirely it. So come away from it because it's part of their R&D function. It's not like Ferrari where they exist to race. Formula One for Honda is research and development. So get yourself very successful. You know, the best racing car there's probably ever been was the McLaren Honda with Senna driving it. Get that successful, stop it. You know, on the verge of a championship winning car in 19 something or other when the Lehman was here, walk away from it. And, you know, the car goes to Braun, championship winning car, but then start again. And they've now gone from being a very difficult start with the McLaren Honda a while ago to having the best racing engine again. And that is all that part of reinventing, retrying, kick the ladder out, start again. That perpetual challenge, you know, and ask yourself at the end of whatever you've done, and I know from the RAF you're big on feedback, aren't you, in terms of how things went, but it is ask yourself, is that the best you could have done? You know, did you leave? You talk about footballers not leaving anything out on the park. Can you come away and say that was the very best I could have done? And if you can turn up to work on a Monday morning saying, what I did last week was okay, but I'm going to get better at this, this, and this. And his view was success is 99% failure. I think that's what Einstein said. Don't be afraid of failure. You know, be afraid of not trying. And if you fail, work out why and keep going. It's a great attitude. And that's why the company's so successful.
Such an interesting area. I think culture is so underrated a lot of the time in organizations as well, because it does shape so much of the whole nature of the organization. I mean, you mentioned John F. Kennedy earlier on. I love the quote from when he went and visited Cape Canaveral, as it was then, and they were doing the space race, and was talking to the cleaner. And the guy says to him, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "So I'm helping to put a man on the moon, Mr. President." And to have that kind of team culture, I think, is just so powerful if you can get it right and a real set of principles that run through. And as you say, you're always going to bump into people who don't necessarily live it and talk it, but don't demonstrate it and all that sort of thing. But you know, your point about managing yourself first, I think that's bang on. You know, you can't necessarily do anything about everyone in that space. You can do something about some of them and not walk on by, perhaps, but you've got to get it right yourself, and you've got to think about your priorities for you and how you shape that and how you make sure you're adding to that culture, not subtracting from it.
I think so. And I think a lot of it is having the mental energy to keep going. You know, tenacity when there's a failure, when it's not working right, is you don't give up. You know, if your team's not performing how you want, you don't just throw your hands up and say, well, that's it. It is to keep going, you keep going, you keep going. And but that's, again, something I've learned all the way through is, you know, it's the minute you think you've made it as a leader, the minute you think you've reached the pinnacle, well, that's when you start going downhill. It never, ever stops. I think that's an important element of leadership. There's so many books about it. You think, oh, I'll read one of those and I'll be fine. It is intensely personal because we're all completely different individuals. So you can learn principles from people. You can look at people and say, no, I like the way they do that. I want to be like that. Or it's got to be personal to you, but you've got to have that constant energy to keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, the leadership book thing's a great example as well, isn't it? I put a post out a while ago on LinkedIn where I was talking about books, and actually I've got some really interesting debate running where there were a couple of people who are going, yeah, it isn't about books, it's just about get on and do it. And I understand why they say that, but the reality is also that it is important to take what you can from other examples, and some of those come from places like books. And but I absolutely agree that I think it's a completely flawed assumption to think you can read a book and suddenly you can now lead. You know, you obviously have to develop a style over many, many moons. I mean, talking on that, so in terms of values and things, how have you shaped and adjusted your own leadership style as you moved up through your very successful career from the bottom up. And we've touched on it a little bit, but it'd be useful just to flesh it out, I think, in terms of what changed for you. What did you suddenly start doing differently at what stage of your career?
I think realizing that the world didn't owe me a living and that I actually had to get off my backside and work, getting my attitude right and wanting to do the best I possibly could and do the right thing was very important. I think a huge thing for me was to take ownership. For a good part of my career, I could see things going wrong and it was, well, somebody needs to fix that. Well, the answer is, actually, I need to fix it. So anything that's affecting my sphere that doesn't work, it's up to me to go and do it. If it has to be, it's up to me, was a quote I was given many years ago, which very much said it's get your mind in the right place. So I've changed that. I've tried to understand the shadow of the leader. My body language is generally appalling because I slouch, I drift off. Still listening, but I don't give people the attention I should. So I had to work very hard on that to be part of it. And I think the tone in which you adopt and provide people with a clarity, provide people with reassurance. What I'm always trying to do is get the best people I can around me, people that are brighter than me, people that work harder than me, people that are going a long way. Give them a clear view of where we want to be, how we want to be seen as a team or a department, and then let them get on with it, not micromanage people. That's a huge part. Get the right people in your team. And if you've got the wrong people, you owe it to the good people in your team to sort that problem out. And I went on one of these leadership sessions in America, and the guy came out with a very quick line, which was fire quickly, fire slowly. And it was, if you've got a bad apple in your team, you're not work around it. You owe it to the other members of your team to establish as almost part of your leadership. I can see what the problem is. I will fix that. We can get on with our work, and take away the barriers for people to be developed. One of the lovely things about Honda as I left, I think 2 members of the board had come through as graduate trainees in the company many, many years ago when I started. And it's wonderful to see those people grow up in an organization. So I grew up in many companies where the idea was to keep people pushed down back in their box and out of the way. See that living, that people come into an organization, do the right things, have the right attitude and push on. And it's just lovely.
It's really interesting. I think one of the things you picked out there, which I think is fascinating and so true, is surrounding yourself with people, not being afraid to surround yourself with people that are actually better, brighter than you are. And I think that is a fairly common failing, I suppose, of leaders where they don't do that. They think that actually they want to keep those people suppressed. They want to look the best they can be. And the reality of that is that actually you're not getting the best outcome you can because you don't know everything. You need the support, you need the help, you need the people who bring in new ideas, and you need to develop them and build on those ideas and not be afraid to be the one that's actually slightly running from behind some of the time in the team.
I think the important thing is getting the structure right. And the other thing you've got to remember is we're only ever caretakers of what we do. So the companies were there before us, they'll be there long after us. I always took it as my responsibility to leave whatever section I was in a better place than it was when I got it. It could have been in a very good place when I got it, but there's always elements you can improve. And that was always to get the best people in and give them the opportunity. When I got to Honda, I went into a regional team which wasn't performing particularly well. And just getting a few of the bright sparks there to think, actually, if every other team, there's 3 or 4 like us, sees how well we're doing, what attitude we've got, how we behave, they'll want to come and work in our team. And you get then the best people wanting to come and work in your department. And that makes everybody else's life better. So always try to work on that. It's just when we go to a field meeting with everybody there, we will behave in a way which shows confidence that we're united and we're working hard and we're moving forward. And whether we are, whatever internal friction we've had, we put that aside and this is how we behave in the company. And I had some great guys who took that on board, and both of them have gone off. One went to be a marketing director of one of our other companies, and the other one's a very senior vice president in another company. And these were guys that just suddenly said, right, I'm on board with that. And off they went. I guess they're spreading that through their teams as well.
Yeah, no, not why. It's back to that. Take the things you like and adopt them yourself as you go through, isn't it? And learn from the successes you see. What about role models? You talked a bit about this in terms of some of the people that had really stood out for you going up the ladder, but inside and outside the industry, who've you really kind of looked at and thought, wow, that's a great role model for the stuff I want to do?
Well, tend to look at role models within the industry. Todd Evans and Roger Manning at Peugeot had a huge influence. When I went to Nissan, there was a guy called David Hurst, who was a long-term motor industry employee with Ford. And, I grew up with Ford being the absolute benchmark of everything in the industry. And again, his way of thinking big of how to get from where we are now, with it not working, to being this company that sells 100,000 cars and is one of the biggest established ones. At Honda, there's a guy called Toshigi-san, who was a European vice president. I just absolutely loved his statesmanship, the way he could analyze problems. He would listen, talk to you all very calmly, quietly, understand your problem, quite frequently tell you why he wasn't going to do what you asked him, but do it in a very, very structured way. And one of my predecessors at Honda, I thought, was an outstanding guy, a guy called David Hodges. And it was just, again, calmness, no side to him, no, here I am type of thing. It was, I'm part of the team. We're going to get together. Here's the culture I would like. Here's how I want us to behave. Here's how I want the team to behave. How should we go about it? And again, just prepared to listen, not afraid of saying what he didn't know and learning, and just fabulous role models. Outside of it, I like looking at people in the military. I read a lot of their biographies and how they've come to manage their tasks.
Yeah, nice. And taking all of that, then, if you look back and you're school age Phil Crossman again, what would you be advising yourself now?
I think is have more self-belief, because I was quite introverted and shy, still am to a degree, but you have to overcome that a little bit in the corporate environment. I would say don't be afraid of failure. I was walking to the post box from the application for the RAF, aged 18, and somebody in my family had been nagging away saying, well, you went to a state school. If you go there, you're going to come up against loads of people who went to private schools and you'll be out of place. And, I just suddenly thought, oh, Christ, the thing I've wanted to do for years, I'm going to be a laughing stock. And I didn't post the application. So I would say to myself, post that letter. But what I would say to myself is actually manage yourself better. So if you are short of certain things, why didn't you join the Air Cadets? Why didn't you speak to people in the RAF about what is needed? Why didn't you, bang, bang, bang? That's what I say to myself. And I, could have been a different thing. I don't know.
Yeah, hey ho, it's amazing, isn't it? I think that whole family gateway thing is a real big issue today as well, as much as anything else, where people have particular expectations for what their kids are going to do and what they don't want them to do. And certainly the military, I know, has had some real challenges with that, where there are some people who, I think particularly when we were involved in more, if you like, hot conflicts, that was a real challenge. I remember talking to a very good friend of mine whose son was very keen to join the army. And she's going, please persuade him not to join the army. I said, well, why would I do that? I love the military. I've done it all my life. Yeah, of course it comes with risks, but so is life. At the end of the day, you're trained well, you're prepped for doing what you're doing. And I think some of those stereotypes that you allude to in terms of reasons not to do things are so often inaccurate. And actually today in the world of social media, it's exacerbated, to be honest, as well. It's even worse. Interesting. So, picking up on traits and leadership traits, what are the specific things now? Now looking at top end of your career, what are the things you thought were the most important for you, but also that the traits you wanted to see in the people that you led and also that were above you? So in particularly in the Honda context out in Japan, what mattered to you?
I think one of the biggest things was honesty, to be absolutely honest about the situation we're in, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, be brutally honest about where we are and what the issues are and what we've got to be overcome. Don't tell me one thing when the story is going on somewhere else to try and pacify me. I really need always, whoever I'm working for, I want to A, learn something from them, B, brutal honesty about where we are and what's going to happen. So I can then, trust me, to then adapt myself and my team to meet those challenges, because it's far better than thinking we're going one way and realizing we're actually somewhere else. So for me, the biggest thing is a real understanding of where we are, then a very clear picture of where we're going to be. That to me is the brightest thing. As long as I've got some direction, I'm very happy then to get on and organise whatever unit I'm with in that direction. Give me a chance to voice my opinion. If I'm wrong, fine. But, don't tell me what to do. Tell me as an organisation what we need to do and let me get on with it. And that's what I would try to do with anybody in my team. I'd want somebody bright enough, urgent enough to say, boss, you got that wrong. I think we should be doing this, and listen. So if I give a red flag to somebody above me, I'd want them to listen rather than just knock you back.
Yeah, brilliant point. I think empowerment as well is what you're alluding to there. I think is so important. It's again a conversation that crops up a lot when I do workshops with people. particularly sort of relatively early on in their careers, when they're just starting to lead teams of people, they're getting busier, they've got more stuff to do, and letting go of things and delegating well and finding a way to actually trust the team that they've now got. Whereas, they've obviously, particularly if they've got personal standards that are high themselves, actually releasing that and trusting other people to do it is a really, really important feature of leadership. So yeah, totally with you there.
I think that's the one thing they don't tell you. And certainly one of my first leadership roles, nobody said anything. It was just, here you go, get on with it. And I've always taken time now with anybody moving into their first leadership job is to remember you have a block of time available to you, right? You cannot continue to do the job you used to do. A good chunk of that time is planning and thinking about the team. A great chunk of that time is interfacing with the team. Let them do the nitty gritty and the job they're paid to do. And you have to work outside of that and let the day-to-day stuff go. And it's particularly in our industry, people love being involved at the Gemba, love doing, and if you get into a leadership role, you've got to step away and let the people do that job. And it's you about creating the environment, keeping the pressure off them, managing upwards. So if, somebody was reported to me who has a team, he's got to manage me and let his team get on with it, and block out all the nonsense that comes from head office. And it's a real big thing that you do. You go from working in the business to working on the business over a period of time. And you've got to think more and more. You start thinking for other people, and you've got to be giving people proper guidance and feedback. There's nothing worse than getting to a year-end review and saying, well, I think you're pretty weak at this, and this. Annual year-end review should be just confirmation of everything you've talked about all the time. This is constant feedback, constant dialogue. If you go to a meeting with somebody, if you go as a senior person, everybody wants to talk to you, but you've got to let the junior person lead the meeting because, that's their job and you've got to get them up to speed with that. And if I used to find it a lot when a dealer would complain to me when I was sales director, come direct to me. Well, I need this, this, and this. Well, I would never give them an answer. I would talk to the area manager, and the area manager would go back with the yes, no, or the solution because, I'm not having people cut out people lower down the team. That's an important statement to your own team is, I'm with you. If we do what we said we're going to do and it fails, it's my fault, not your fault. I'll take the blame for anything this team does wrong as long as we are working to our best endeavours and trying to do the right thing. We will make mistakes. The main thing is learn from the mistakes. I'm not going to shout at anybody because they made a mistake. I'm more likely to fall out with somebody who sits on the backside and doesn't do anything.
So many great points in there. I totally agree with that. And I think it's, interesting to go right back to your first leadership role, not prepared for it thing. One of the reasons I do what I do now is because having left the military, gone into the corporate world, I've seen that so many times where people are by and large promoted because of their business delivery, their success in the business. They're not promoted because they see potential in them as a leader of the organization. And that's fine. I can completely get that. You want someone who's obviously doing what the organization demands and that they've been prepared for that and they're doing well at it. But then not giving them the tools and the training and the preparation to turn around and actually excel in a new sort of senior leadership or even a junior leadership role is a real failing in my book. I think it's definitely something that needs to be done better.
Oh, absolutely. If I could add 5 days with somebody like yourself or some of the things I've learned prior to going into it, it would have transformed it. I think what would have helped me greatly is if somebody had given me the basics of leadership that, if I could have started again that particular team, I would have got every team member individually, and the process I adopted later is ask people what we do well, what don't we do well, what should we stop doing and what should we start doing, to try and get this ownership of that sort of thing. Understand more about that, understand about giving a direction, understand about engaging with the team properly, understand about doing the right thing each time. And that's the sort of thing I would love, to understand what my body language was. Come in and think, because you are in this role, therefore everybody will do what you say, is not going to happen. And that was a big change in attitude, that I've got to do more in terms of the management, the direction, where we got some bad attitudes to change it. And I didn't do any of that. I tried to skate around it. And I think next time I had a team, I had the opportunity of recruiting from fresh. And, again, we talked about the Honda philosophy a bit earlier. We used a thing about how we recruit, which is a basis called HPIC, So all these people have got the Honda attitude. Have they got passion for what they want to do? Do you want them in the organisation? Are they inquisitive? Are they investigative? And the big thing is, are they challenging? So, you look at those human traits of people you recruit. And again, if I'd had the opportunity to do that earlier, it would have made a big difference. So that's something all through the career onwards. That is, you recruit on attitude, you recruit on passion, not necessarily about technical ability. Sure, if you're looking for a finance director, you need somebody who's an accountant. If you're an HR director, they've got to have some HR background. There are a lot of positions in which I wished I could have done more of, is you see somebody in a completely different environment who's absolutely bang on with all those things you want and get them into your organisation. Now, we used to be able to do that. I think Persia was very good at that. They kept some space in their headcount for it. People were brought in into holding roles, understand the company, but they just got absolutely everything that you'd want of an individual in your team. That's fantastic.
It makes great sense. And I think that preparation is everything, isn't it, in terms of being able to manage that and finding the opportunity to do those kind of training interventions. Switching tack a little bit, let's just talk about successes and indeed failures, if you like. So when you look back across your whole career, what do you wish you'd done differently? What was your high point? And equally, what was your low point?
What I would have done differently is got my attitude right. We talk about, don't, I think I mentioned it earlier on, don't ask the company what it can do for you. What can I do from the company? And I have to realise it's not just turning up and doing 9 to 5, but you've actually got to be involved. You've got to be a difference. You've got to actually not quite make yourself indispensable, but make yourself somebody that your immediate boss can rely on and want you in their team. I wished I'd learned that a lot earlier. In terms of failures, biggest failure in my life was I was appointed to a regional sales team at Peugeot, and I was utterly unprepared. I got the wrong attitude. And what I did take out from that, I was very lucky in that I got a good enough reputation in the company. 2 years into that, they started a major project, which was right around my strengths. I was able to get back into that, refreshed, do the right thing, get the people right, and was very successful. And from then on, that has been much, much better. Some of the other challenges, I think probably not so much failures, but we had 2 massive challenges. That was the Lehman shock. When that happened, I think people underestimate how close we were to collapse, I think. The fundamental bedrock of first world capitalist society, the banking system, was broken and businesses were falling like a house of cards. And how we managed that, turn that, what was a tragedy, not into a success, but we got our way through it, was an important leadership thing because people were scared stiff. And you had to be able to say to people with confidence, this is what we need you to do for the company. This is your role. Don't worry about the banking system. It will be all right. And another part of leadership is to give people the confidence that actually it will be all right. It generally is. And if it's not, well, we've all done our best, that sort of thing.
It's really helpful. And I think that those challenges and being strong as a leader through the challenges is really important. And as you say, even if you don't necessarily know the way forward yourself, then demonstrating confidence that brings confidence to other people, I think is vitally important. Doesn't mean you're not empathetic and understand the difficulties they're facing, but you certainly need to be the kind of somebody that can be followed at that point, I think. But picking up on the failure point, so I mean, you said you were fortunate. You came out of that role into another one that played more to your strengths. What did you learn from it, though? What did how did you adapt as a result?
Thinking more about the role, I just tended to treat it as a 9 to 5, turn up Monday morning, go home Friday night. And you can't do that because you've got to think ahead of what you need from your team. You've almost got to be a week, 2 weeks ahead and have an answer to everything. There's too many things that I took at face value, didn't check my understanding of it, which meant I couldn't relay it to the team properly. So what I learned from that is to understand, before I spoke to anybody, understand what the problem was, what our likely response would be as a team, what we wanted to do, and then brief them in the correct way. So I was chasing the job rather than being ahead of the job and having control of it and planning it. And that was my biggest learning point from that, was when I came out of it, always start thinking more about the job. And consequently, from then on, probably like yourself, is whether you've got a day off or not, it is constantly in your head about what you should be doing and what you can do. It's not necessarily fretting about it or absorbing a conversation, but when you're driving in the car, you tend to think about work rather than roadworks or whatever. And I think it was that step up that if you're going to be into any form of leadership role, you don't do that from 9 in till 5 at night. It's with you. It's constantly with you. And you more than anybody with some of the roles you've done subsequently.
Yeah, it's not 9 to 5. No, you're absolutely right.
24/7, isn't it? And that was part of it was, be prepared for everything that's likely to come up. Think ahead. What are your team going to be asking you? What's going to be worrying them? What are the outcomes? And can we provide a solution to it? And that to me was one of the biggest things that I learned from that was, boy, lads, you've got to up your game, up your game. And it's not about the detail of the nitty gritty of the job. It is about how we as a unit function and how we're going to prepare ourselves to meet the challenges coming, and be further ahead. I went back into a similar role at Nissan many years later, and it worked out really, really well. We had, sorted a few things out in the team, and then we went racing away. Same thing again at Honda, an underperforming team. From that, I was willing to become sales director by getting the team organised, and that was purely having a clear view of what you would expect from me. Here's what you'll get from me. You'll get this honesty, this trust, blah, 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 blah. This is what I need from you. Having spoken to all of you, this is what I see the problems are. This is how I think we can handle it. This is what you would like to do that we're not doing. So we will do that. And it was that painting the picture and having control is the wrong word, being aware of everything. People use a helicopter view. That's a bit trite, but it is thinking of the team as a unit and then handling each individual differently as well to their strengths and weaknesses, and understanding people, what motivates them and who's underperforming and why, who's capable and more, but just needs a little bit of guidance and that sort of thing. And thinking more and more about the people and the role than just turning up and batting back whatever comes back to you. That's a huge change.
Some great points in there. Legacies. Everyone talks about legacies. You've come to the end of a long, very successful by any measure career. What was the most important achievement for you, and what kind of legacy do you feel you've left, and are you happy with it?
Happy? No, of course. I always think you could do more. There's things I look back on and think, I should have done that. Could have done that. I would hope that people would have come away with respect for what we achieved, and a few members of the organisation would have taken some of the things from me on into developing their own careers. The happiest thing for me, as I said, was seeing a number of my initial team go on to be senior roles in other companies, and people I was mentoring as graduates ending up on the board as I retired. That to me is the best part, and was Honda in a better place when I left it? I think so. The guy I took over from, Dave Hodgetts, left it in a great place. I think I moved that on. He came back after me, and I guess I would hope, almost certainly, he's moved on again. This perpetual fine-tuning, So anything, we had a good time, we had a good team, we had a lot of fun, and we got the job done. And that's what I take out of it. We got the job done, but we had a good time doing it. And it's, I think that's very important as well. You've got to have a social side to your team. It's because we're all remote, getting together and having a few beers once a month or once a quarter, letting people relax and be themselves in your presence, absolutely important. There's one thing I did learn from you as well, actually, was you invited me to an event at Coningsby, which was very motor trade in its way. It was very exciting. I can't remember if it was a dining in or a dining out night, but halfway through the evening, one of your pilots came in who had been in America and was talking to you about the typhoon, and this was about 2 a.m, thing, and he had something to get off his chest, and you just listened to him, heard his argument, gave him a very reasonable, structured response back. He got off his chest. I thought, that's great, because, it was a night out almost. But the thing is, as a leader, it's never a night out. You're always on it. And this guy clearly got to a point where he thought, I'll go and have a word with the boss. I can't remember what it was about. It was about the gun or something like that. And he had just come back off might have been the F-18, I don't know. And it was just the way he handled it. And I thought, that was like Roger Manning, who I referred to earlier on. Just at that moment, take it back, sort it out, proper answer. He'd had his say, and we all went on again.
Yeah, although amusingly, so a different anecdote, different time for an event you weren't at, where I remember when I was commanding a squadron a long time ago, and we were going to an all ranks function, which was with families, and I was chatting to a couple of my guys, and I had cause to say to one of them, I said, look, just make sure that when your good lady comes and tells me that, why am I deploying you constantly and not deploying anybody else, that you've prepped the battle space here, because I'm not going to cover for you too many times that you're the one that you're the first to volunteer to go and do it. And it was just very funny because he was. This was a guy who was always, just loved the job. He always wanted to get out there. And clearly he was going home and saying, I've got to do this. The boss is insisting. And I go, hang on, I'm now getting a hard time for your personal choice, which was just a bit harsh. But yeah, it's funny.
But I do think in terms of the team, it's, having an element of downtime together is very, very important, particularly if it's the end of a campaign and you've all done well. And this one we used to have, if we'd hit our target, I always kept a few beers in the fridge. And people driving home, we couldn't leg this, but just sit down with a can of beer, just having a little feedback of how it went and almost a little feedback session. Very, very important to let everybody know almost informally that it'd gone well, they'd done well. Great.
I think the two most underutilized words in the English language in business are thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
So really, really such an easy thing to do, particularly from a leadership position, to take a bit of time just to either write someone a note or even just pop by the desk and say thanks. And particularly if you're the senior guy, then that matters a huge amount. Comes across brilliantly. And we often don't do it.
always endeavour to say thank you to anybody personally and things like that. One thing would I have done better at Honda? What Dave was brilliant at was just going and sitting at somebody's desk and chatting to them in the course of the day. A little inhibition always got the better of me. Of course, I thought they don't want the boss coming to sit and chat to them. So I would do it, but not as much as I should have done. That's a very important thing. Just don't come in. Fortunately, we didn't have offices, so we were open plan. But I've seen many bosses just walk in, get in their office, shut the door, and nobody sees them for the rest of the day. And it's important to get out and about and be seen. If I could have improved anything, I've done more and more of that.
Totally. That's great. Hey, look, I can't have a former CEO of a major motor manufacturer on my podcast and not talk about the future of the motor industry. And I think, given your vast experience in it, I'm just really interested for you to get your crystal ball out and start looking at what's the world going to look like. Obviously, electric vehicles are all the news and are great. I mean, I've had a couple myself. I remember when I was actually with you at the Festival of Speed, enjoying your hospitality a while back. We were talking about hydrogen and Honda's sort of a very innovative approach to the way it was going about that. Where do you see, not just at Honda, but just generally, where do you see this actually heading and landing in the next 10 to 15 years?
I think it's going to be a very interesting time. I mean, first and foremost, we've got to do something about saving the world. It's not somebody else's problem. It's every one of us have got to do something. I think sadly we've left the electrical vehicle thing to the politicians. They've gone galloping off with a task of getting us fully electrified without thinking through the implications of it. We've got to have cars that are not powered by fossil fuels. Absolutely fact of life. Having cars run with electric motors at their wheels got to be the best way forward. How you produce that electricity, I think, is where we've got the gap. We see the irony of the Commonwealth Games just up the road in Birmingham, of everybody charging around in electric vehicles, pronouncing this fact of how well they're doing them, then driving to a diesel generator to charge them at night. And that is probably a little microcosm of some of the problems we've got. What is the point of having electric cars if we're going to have to start increasing coal-fired power stations, say, to get it? The production of electric cars right now is absorbing more of our precious minerals than ICU engines are. So I think if we've gone for a more phased approach of probably plug-in electrical vehicles, but with an ICU engine, the EHV, I think that would have been a great interim step so we can work out how we can produce clean, cheap electricity for everybody. I think a lot of the early adopters into it are people that can afford solar panels, have got a drive where they can get their own charger, and that makes life very easy. It's a whole stack of houses where you cannot get parked outside your house and you cannot get a charger. We just haven't got that capacity yet. Now, in terms of whether it's pure electricity or hydrogen, I'm an absolute advocate of hydrogen. 2004, I went to Japan on a trip, and I went up to the mountains to their racetrack there called Toshigi. Wonderful, very special place. It's got the Honda Museum there, a huge banked oval and a racetrack around the middle. And I drove their hydrogen-powered car at the time. This was 2004. Lovely little saloon. And I got to sit with a guy who was a large project leader. His English was marginally better than my Japanese, but between us, we worked out we were of a similar age. We were both utterly fascinated with Apollo when we were teenagers. The whole Apollo 8 onwards was just sensational. I don't think there's ever been anything like it since. And I was obviously at home sitting gawping at it. He was sitting at home thinking, why can't I use that fuel cell technology in a car? Aged about 15. I went to Tokyo University and studied it, came back in and was given the opportunity to run that as a project. And we were driving around this car, three middle-aged men, born at similar times, worlds apart, driving this most fantastic piece of kit that drove like a gasoline car, formed like one, and the only output from it was water. And I'm absolutely convinced of it since. Hydrogen is the most abundant gas on the planet, highly renewable, and you don't need the batteries that we have to have for electric vehicles. So to me, that seemed to be the great solution. The challenge was, of course, the EU is run by the French and German manufacturers, and they took us all hammering down this diesel route, which wasn't probably the right thing to do at the time. So we've got ourselves boxed in, and our solution is to go purely EV. What I'm finding also is there's a lot of early adopters have now gone back to some form of petrol engine, having been through the experiments of it. Now, we've got to get there. Hydrogen, probably for domestic vehicles, might not be the answer. It would be a fantastic way of running heavy goods vehicles who are trundling up and down the road. If you could get hydrogen power for ships instead of burning bunker fuel, it'd make a huge difference again. So I don't know where we'll go with it, to be honest, other than if we don't do something, it's going to be a problem. The way we're going about it immediately, I don't think it's a solution. And the reality is, until we get China, Russia, India, and maybe America cleaning up their emissions, having running around London in an electric vehicle, it's not going to fix the problem. But we have to do something, you know.
No, I agree with you 100% on that last point. I think it's obviously, I mean, the UK's got to sort of try and be a leader in this space and be an example as a major economy. I totally get that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the big economies obviously got to follow suit. How realistic do you think it is that we're talking about no sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2030 then?
I think it's going to be a risk, because I can see suddenly a lot of people, instead of buying a new car, buying a used diesel. You know, I can see the demand for ICE cars going through the roof towards the end, as people, maybe my generation, have just think, maybe it's not the way forward. You know, maybe we have to change the way we own cars, that we don't have our own cars, but, you know, it's like an Uber bike thing for cars, gets more and more traction. So you go to an electrical charging space and get a car and use it. And if we're going to cut down the number of cars we've got, which we probably ought to do, we've got to get our public transport system much, much better than it currently is, because we are set up industrially of people who work a long way from where they live and not necessarily on train lines, you know. So 30 years ago, somebody living in Luton wouldn't work in Slough, but you build the M25, and they do. But you can't get there by train, you know. Yeah,
I mean, I'm exactly in that position. I'm 10 minutes away from the nearest station by car, and there's no bus service to speak of, really. So living out in the country. So yeah, you're absolutely right. On the public transport, things is a real challenge. And interestingly, I mean, I think I own 2 Teslas, as you know, and it was brilliant. It was a lovely car. Really enjoyed it. It was performance was amazing and everything else. But the challenge is now there are a lot of them on the road, obviously, and that's great. It's good for Tesla that they've achieved that. But everything you've just said about capacity, not just in terms of physical numbers of charging points, but actually ultimately the capacity of the electricity grid to generate the what's required in terms of supporting them without what's now starting to happen, and I see it still on some of the Facebook groups and things with Tesla, that people are having to queue for charging, which when the charging was never an issue. 40 minutes to charge the car and it goes a long way was not a problem. But it is a problem if you're having to wait an hour to get on to start your 40 minutes, then suddenly that's a much bigger challenge. So that there are definitely some really big issues there that have got to be solved.
I think if you use your car for local domestic commuting, absolutely fantastic. If you can get your car and you drive and charge up, or you're driving to a friend's house and charge up, that'd be great. Trying to use it for work, if you're doing 1,000 miles a week, as many, many people do going up and down the country, it's suddenly going to be putting, another half a day to a day on your week, waiting to queue up, But it doesn't mean we shouldn't continue with it. We will get better at battery production, a longer life. I believe in having some form of petrol engine that can get you out in an emergency. Very much the way forward. A lot of the new EHVs now are getting 700, 800 miles per tank of petrol, and an initial charge takes 2.5 hours that will get them 80 or 90 electric miles. That to me is fantastic, because you're clearly bridging the gap until we can find a way of getting better batteries. We're not draining the world of lithium. At some point, we're going to be held to ransom by somebody over it, or all the batteries will be built somewhere else. That'll be the thing. We've gone off at a dizzy pace to do it. It's a very Honda thing, kicking the ladder away, right? We will not have petrol engines by 2030. Get on with it. So from that point of view, I like it. And, we cannot say can't do it. Although in many parts of the world, the air coming out the back of the car is cleaner than the air going into the front of it, even with a petrol engine. And it's a big problem. And it will only be solved if the entire world decides to crack it. And I think we've got a way to do to get that sorted out.
Totally agree. I think that's particularly when you've got countries that are either way behind in economic development or indeed are kind of wedded, as America is, for example, to its cars and loves big engine, not very efficient cars. Yeah, real challenge.
I mean, if they can get in the ideal world that solar panels improve to such an extent, you can have a solar panel on the roof, the bonnet and the boot of your car that charges it and gives you enough electric, then we might be getting some way towards it. But we've still got a huge, huge amount of R&D to do till we get there. Efficiency
of the panels is the key to that, isn't it?
Yeah. And also, a lot of the problems with solar panels now is they're not very easily recyclable. So again, the technology, the principle of it works. The actual practicality in terms of improving how we look after this planet is not fully thought through yet. But as I say, I think it could have impacts on car ownership for a lot of people.
On a happier note, what's the most fun vehicle as a car guy that you've ever driven?
The thing that, again, switched the lights on me about cars was a Peugeot 205 GTI. which was at the time in 1980 for a young lad who had been driving British sailing cars. My first company car was a Morris Marina, remember? And we get one of these things, and the way it cornered was just utterly sensational. The only downside of it was when he turned left, the engine cut out, but I think that's probably fixable. That suddenly taught me about what nice handling cars were. The next one, I think, would have been the Honda NSX. We were lucky enough to go to Estoril racetrack when this last car came out. And my word, it's every bit of Honda technology in that car. So four-wheel drive that's completely variable, a unit that will shift the power from the near side front to the offside rear, front axle to rear axle in a split second. It had a unit in it that comes out of the robot, so it would detect pitch, roll and yaw and compensate for it with an engine and battery power that would make your eyes blur if you went flat out. So I drove that, it took my breath away. And then when I parked, I had the opportunity to go out with a professional racing driver in it. My word. You know.
Yeah, that's always a pretty spectacular experience. I've done that as well at Snetterton.
Well, that's been transformational. A couple of things. Many years ago at Peugeot, again with the 205 GTI launch, we took a lot of the salespeople out there to a track just outside Paris. And all these young lads were charging around, white knuckles and elbows everywhere in this 205, and we're standing in the pits watching it. And this vision comes over, this man with massive long blonde hair, gold racing overalls with a Galois hanging off his mouth. He pointed at a couple of us, pointed at the Peugeot 1.6 diesel 405 that the events crew were using as a hat car. And we all piled into it, you know, flicked his Galois out, and this thing went off. And without any sweat or bother, we were suddenly going around this racetrack, passing all these lads in the GTIs, with him with his elbow out the window. And so just got back in, got the Galois out of his packet, lifted another one and went...
Yeah, that's got shades of. I used to love Jeremy Clarkson when he was doing Top Gear and the Nürburgring episode with Sabine Schmidt, sadly now deceased. But when you know she goes down, I could do a better time in a van. And so they put her to the challenge, and she very, very nearly did. That was just extraordinary. You get a professional driver at the hands of anything, really. It's incredible what they can do.
Oh, I thought, with professional drivers, it's eye-opening. Absolutely. I mean, we used to have a touring car team. Did you ever come to the touring cars?
No.
One of the drivers, they used to have some fun. Gordon Shedden, 3 times champion. We were out in Hungary for a Civic GT launch, and his idea of fun was to drive around the entire track, not looking where he was going, but looking at me in the eye while he was driving. And he was still faster than me if I was driving the car.
We did a Brands Hatch racing team thing at Snetterton when I was at Squadron Commander at Coleshill. And a bunch of us went across, and they did it with, they were XR3Is, I think, and then Formula Firsts. And obviously they normally do it with paying punters, and they were more restrictive with them. They were actually bit gloves off with us in terms of rev limits and things like that. But we did, where the guys came and did an airfield attack at Snetterton with 4 Jaguars before this all started. And and I think that kind of injected some enthusiasm into their professional drivers, let's put it that way. So they were pretty determined they were going to show that they were really up for this. And it was quite impressive, if a little terrifying at times.
Well, I talked to you earlier about preparation for being part of management. One final car story from Honda. I took a group of dealers out to Japan, get a bit of culture, and we went up to a place called Toshigi, which is a very, very secret research and development place. And we were tootling around, and it was a prototype of the Civic Type R. So we were all put in this car with their tame racing driver, and took us out, and there's a banked oval at Toshigi, go whizzing round. So we all get in, and this thing goes off. He just gave me this inane grin and just asked, banzai, and off we went. Oh, Christ. And this thing was tanking down, and all there was on the dashboard was a screen like an iPad with the speed, and it got to 150k. And I was sitting in the front, and I looked up, and all I could see was a concrete wall in front of me, which was a bank oval. Forgot who was in the back, looked in the mirror, and there was 3 of the richest and most powerful motor trade dealers in the back seat. And I suddenly at that moment thought, I haven't done the insurance for this. But fortunately, his aim was spot on, and of course, you just fly around the corner, but oh dear.
Brilliant. Yeah, you've got to love it. Fabulous stories. So, very last question then, Phil. What's the most difficult question you've ever been asked?
Well, I think that one probably is. This is absolutely non-motor trade. I'm very blessed to have 4 grandchildren. And in the last 2 weeks, we've been taking them out for the day. I went to Cadbury World with my granddaughters, and we had a lovely, lovely quiet day. And completely out of the blue, we were driving home. The younger one said, "Why do people have wars?" Now, how do you answer that? For a 6-year-old, I don't know. And then only yesterday, I was with my grandson, and we were again, had a lovely day, tootling about, driving along. I said, Grandad, where's heaven? Of course, obviously, they were difficult questions. So, you don't want to lie to them. So you try and rationalize it. But I found those two most difficult questions of the last few weeks, that's for sure.
Out of the mouths of babes. Absolutely. Hey, look, Phil, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. You've been really generous. And I think some tremendous insights, some really good leadership insights as well, which is so useful and across a great career. And I'm extremely grateful to you for all of that. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bob. Good to speak to you. And I probably forgot more than I've said as well. So, never mind.
Yeah, never mind. No, it's great. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.